Captain Marcus Chun had seen many strange things during his 10 years aboard the interstellar research vessel Prometheus. He had witnessed gas giants that rained diamonds, observed civilizations that communicated through bioluminescent patterns, and negotiated trade agreements with beings made of crystallized thought. But nothing had prepared him for the moment when Admiral Vex High of the Vulpine Confederation stepped onto his bridge. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with russet fur that seemed to shimmer under the ship's artificial lighting. Her ears, pointed and mobile, twitched constantly as they picked up every sound on the bridge. Her tail, thick and luxurious, swayed behind her with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Most striking were her eyes, amber orbs that seemed to hold depths of intelligence, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. "Captain Chun," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made the universal translator seem almost inadequate. "I am Admiral Vex High, representative of the Vulpine Confederation's First Fleet. Your species has requested diplomatic contact. I am here to evaluate whether humanity is worthy of inclusion in the Galactic Council." The bridge crew, normally composed and professional, seemed momentarily stunned. First contact protocols had been drilled into them countless times, but facing an actual alien dignitary was different from simulations. Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Admiral Vex High, welcome aboard the Prometheus. I'm honored to be the first human to formally meet a representative of your people." She looked at his outstretched hand with curious eyes, then reached out with her own. Her fingers were longer than human digits, ending in what appeared to be retractable claws currently sheathed. Her palm was warm, covered in fine fur, and Marcus was surprised by the gentleness of her grip. "Interesting," she murmured, her ears twitching forward. "Your species uses physical contact as a greeting ritual. Most civilized races consider such behavior primitive." "Perhaps," Marcus replied, not taking offense. "But we found that sometimes the most direct approach is the most effective." Something flickered in her amber eyes, an expression that might have been amusement. "Direct. Yes, I've read the reports about your species. You conquered your home world through persistence and adaptability rather than superior technology or psychic abilities." Curious. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, the ship's xenobiologist, stepped forward. "Admiral, if I may ask, your species appears to have evolved from what we might classify as canids. Is that assessment correct?" Vex High's tail swished, and Marcus noticed how the movement seemed almost deliberate, as if she was conveying information through body language that humans couldn't interpret. "Vulpines, Lieutenant. We are descended from what your earthbound linguists might call foxes, though we diverged from our primitive ancestors millions of years ago." "Fascinating," Rodriguez breathed. "The evolutionary adaptations must have been remarkable to achieve spaceflight capability." "Indeed, though I suspect your species' development was no less remarkable. Most races achieve interstellar travel through collective consciousness, hive minds, or inherited technological gifts from predecessor species. Humans appear to have clawed their way to the stars through individual determination and what your files describe as stubborn refusal to accept limitations." The way she said it made it sound almost like a joke, but Marcus detected no mockery in her tone. If anything, there was a note of genuine curiosity. "Admiral," Marcus said, "I understand you're here to evaluate our worthiness for Galactic Council membership. What does that evaluation entail?" Her ears perked forward, and her tail gave a slow, measured swish. "An excellent question, Captain. The Council has specific criteria for membership. A species must demonstrate technological capability, which you have clearly achieved. They must show emotional stability and rational decision-making capabilities. They must prove they can contribute something unique to the galactic community. And you're here to assess all of that, among other things." Her amber eyes seemed to study him intently. "I will be observing your crew's operations for the next 7 standard days. During this time, I will evaluate how humans handle stress, conflict resolution, creative problem solving, and social dynamics. Chief Engineer Tom Nakamura looked up from his console. What happens if we don't meet your standards? Vexai's expression became unreadable. Then, humanity remains isolated to this small section of the galaxy, under informal quarantine until you either develop further or extinction claims you. The weight of her words settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. Marcus felt the responsibility of his entire species resting on his shoulders. "Well then," he said, managing to keep his voice steady, "we'd better make a good impression." That first day passed in a whirlwind of formal presentations and carefully orchestrated demonstrations of human capability. Vexai observed everything with those penetrating amber eyes, occasionally making notes on a device that looked like crystallized starlight. She asked probing questions about human history, culture, and decision-making processes. During the afternoon, they encountered their first test when long-range sensors detected a distress signal from a small cargo vessel. The ship appeared to be of Rigelian design, one of the minor spacefaring species that had achieved limited interstellar travel. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Chun of the Earth ship Prometheus. We've received your distress signal. What is your situation? The response came crackling through subspace, filled with static and what sounded like panic. This is cargo vessel Star's Fortune. We've lost main propulsion, and life support is failing. Hull breach in Section 7. We have 14 crew members aboard. Marcus looked to his tactical officer. "Lieutenant Park, what's our ETA to their position?" "At maximum warp, 18 minutes, sir." "Make it 16. Chief Nakamura, prepare emergency repair teams." Dr. Williams, ready sick bay for potential casualties. As the crew sprang into action with practiced efficiency, Marcus noticed Vexai watching intently. Her tail had gone still, which he was beginning to recognize as a sign of focused attention. "This vessel is not human," she observed quietly. "No," admitted. "They're Rigelian. Yet you respond to their distress signal without hesitation." "Of course. They need help." Her head tilted slightly, a gesture that reminded Marcus startlingly of an Earth fox. Most species limit their assistance to members of their own kind, or to those with whom they have formal alliance agreements. "That seems inefficient," Marcus replied. "If someone needs help, and you can provide it, why wouldn't you?" Before she could respond, Lieutenant Parr called out, "Captain, sensors are showing the Rigelian vessel is in worse shape than initially reported. They're venting atmosphere, and their reactor appears to be destabilizing. Time to reach them? 12 minutes at current speed." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. 12 minutes might be too long. "Chief, can we push the engines any harder? I can give you another 0.2 on the warp factor, but we'll risk damaging the dilithium matrix." "Do it." As the Prometheus surged forward at dangerous speeds, Marcus noticed Vexai's ears had swiveled to track every conversation on the bridge. She seemed particularly interested in the fact that his crew was willing to risk their own ship's systems to save strangers. They reached the Rigelian vessel with 3 minutes to spare before complete life support failure. The rescue operation that followed showcased human ingenuity and determination at its finest. When conventional docking proved impossible due to the cargo ship's tumbling motion, Chief Nakamura jury-rigged a magnetic coupling system using spare parts and emergency power cells. When the Rigelian captain proved too injured to assist with evacuating his crew, Lieutenant Rodriguez dove into the damaged ship's toxic atmosphere, using only a basic environmental suit and her own courage. When the cargo vessel's reactor began showing signs of imminent breach, Dr. Williams worked alongside Rigelian physiology she'd never seen before to stabilize the injured. Through it all, Marcus coordinated the rescue with calm authority, making split-second decisions that balanced risk against the lives they were trying to save. When the last Rigelian was safely aboard the Prometheus, and the cargo vessel's reactor was successfully jettisoned to explode harmlessly in empty space, Marcus finally allowed himself to breathe. All crew members accounted for, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, her environmental suit still smoking from exposure to the cargo ship's corrosive atmosphere. 14 Rigelians safe, 6 requiring immediate medical attention. Outstanding work, everyone, Marcus said. Chief, damage report on our systems? Dilithium matrix held, but barely. We'll need to run at reduced warp for the next 6 hours while the crystals stabilize. As the bridge crew began securing from emergency stations, Marcus became aware of Vexhai standing close beside him. Her amber eyes were studying him with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. That was illuminating, she said softly. Admiral, your crew risked significant damage to their own vessel to save complete strangers. The Rigelians have no formal alliance with Earth, no trade agreements, no political value to humanity whatsoever. They were in distress. Yes, and that was sufficient reason for you to act. Her tail swished once, slowly. Most council species would have filed a report with the appropriate authorities and continued on their mission. What would your people have done? Her ears flattened slightly against her head. Filed a report with the appropriate authorities, she admitted. That evening, Marcus found himself in the ship's observation lounge, staring out at the stars and trying to process the weight of representing his entire species. He was nursing a cup of coffee when Vexhai entered, moving with a fluid grace that reminded him why her people were called Vulpines. Mind if I join you, Captain? Please. He gestured to a nearby chair. She settled into the seat with unconscious elegance, her tail curving around to rest across her lap. I wanted to thank you. Thank me for allowing me to observe today's rescue. It was educational. Marcus studied her expression, tried to read alien body language. You sound surprised. I am. The Council's preliminary assessment of humanity was that you were a violent, aggressive species likely to destabilize galactic peace. And now? Her amber eyes met his directly. Now I'm beginning to wonder if the Council's assessment methods might be flawed. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching stars will slowly pass the observation port. Finally, Vexhai spoke again. Tell me, Captain, why did you choose a career in space exploration? To see what's out there, Marcus replied simply. To meet new people, learn new things, maybe make the universe a little bit better. Not for wealth, power, or advancement. Those things can be side effects, but they're not the goal. He turned to study her profile. What about you? Why did you become an admiral? Duty, she answered immediately. My family has served the Confederation's military for 17 generations. It was expected, not chosen. Her ears twitched. Choice is a luxury few species enjoy, Captain. Most of us are born into predetermined roles. That sounds lonely. The observation caught her off guard. Her head turned sharply toward him, amber eyes wide. Lonely? Never being able to choose your own path. Never knowing if you're doing something because you want to or because you're supposed to. For a long moment, she stared at him with an expression he couldn't interpret. Then, slowly, her tail began to swish from side to side. You know, Captain, most council species find humans unsettling. Why? Because you do things like this. You make personal observations about strangers. You ask questions about feelings and motivations. You act as if every individual matters. Don't they? Again, that sharp look. Most civilized species have moved beyond such primitive individualism. Maybe, Marcus said carefully, moving beyond it was a mistake. Her tail went still again. In the starlight filtering through the observation port, her fur seemed to shimmer with highlights he hadn't noticed before. There was something almost mesmerizing about the pattern. Captain Shun, she said slowly, you are either the most dangerous human I could have encountered, or the most fascinating. I hope it's the latter. So do I, she murmured, and there was something in her voice that made Marcus look at her more closely. For the first time since she'd arrived, Admiral Vexhai of the Vulpine Confederation looked uncertain. It was a strangely humanizing moment, and Marcus found himself wondering what lay beneath the formal diplomatic exterior. Admiral, may I ask you a personal question? You may ask. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to choose your own path? Her amber eyes held his for a long moment, and her tail gave the slightest twitch. Every day, Captain Chun. Every single day. As they continued to talk late into the ship's night cycle, Neither of them noticed how her formal posture gradually relaxed, or how her tail began to move with subtle, unconscious grace. But they would both remember this moment later, when everything changed. The evaluation had begun, but so had something else entirely. Something that would challenge not just human worthiness for the Galactic Council, but the very foundations of how civilized species were supposed to interact. Marcus Chun had no idea that by the end of the week, he would be questioning everything he thought he knew about duty, choice, and what it truly meant to reach for the stars. But for now, in the quiet starlight of the observation lounge, he was content to listen to Admiral Vexhai talk about distant worlds and ancient traditions, watching her amber eyes reflect the light of foreign suns, and try not to notice how beautiful her tail looked when it moved. The second day of Admiral Vexhai's evaluation began with what should have been a routine survey mission to the third planet of the Kepler 442 system. Long-range sensors had detected unusual energy readings that warranted investigation, and Marcus had planned it as a simple demonstration of human scientific methodology. Vexhai appeared on the bridge wearing a different outfit than the formal military uniform she'd worn the previous day. This was more practical, he noticed, with panels that seemed designed to accommodate her tail's movement and her distinctive anatomy. The amber eyes that had seemed so penetrating yesterday now held a hint of something that might have been anticipation. "Good morning, Admiral," Marcus greeted her. "Ready for some boring, scientific survey work?" Her ears twitched, and what he was learning was her equivalent of a smile. "I find very little about human operations boring so far, Captain." Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from her science station. "Captain, preliminary scans of Kepler 442c are showing some interesting readings. The planet appears to be covered in crystalline formations that are generating coherent energy patterns." Natural formations? That's what we're here to find out. As the Prometheus entered orbit around the planet, the main screen displayed a world unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The surface was covered in vast geometric structures that rose from the ground like crystal mountains, each one pulsing with soft, rhythmic light. "Magnificent!" Vexhai breathed, her tail swaying slowly as she stared at the display. "The formations appear to be artificially constructed, but there are no life sign readings," Chief Nakamura reported from his station. "No energy signatures that suggest active technology." "Permission to lead an away team, Captain?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. Marcus was about to give his approval when his tactical officer spoke up. "Sir, I'm detecting a massive energy buildup within the largest crystal formation. Whatever's happening down there, it's accelerating." Before anyone could respond, the main screen filled with brilliant light as energy erupted from the crystal structures. But instead of the destructive explosion Marcus expected, the energy formed complex patterns in the planet's atmosphere, weaving itself into shapes that were undeniably artistic. "It's beautiful," whispered Lieutenant Park. "It's also directed at us," Chief Nakamura added grimly. "That energy pattern is specifically aimed at our ship." Vexhai stepped forward, her attention completely focused on the display. "Captain, I believe you're witnessing first contact with a non-biological intelligence. The crystals are alive. Not alive in any sense we would recognize, but intelligent, yes." As if responding to her words, the energy patterns shifted, forming new configurations that pulsed in rhythm with the ship's main systems. Marcus could hear the subtle changes in the Prometheus's background hum as the alien intelligence somehow synchronized with their technology. "Sir," Rodriguez called out, excitement clear in her voice, "I'm receiving data transmissions. The intelligence is trying to communicate by interfacing directly with our computers. Is it safe?" The data streams appear to be purely informational. No viral components, no attempt to access restricted systems. Marcus looked to Vexhai. "Admiral, in your experience with first contact situations, what would you recommend?" Her amber eyes met his, and for a moment he thought he saw something like approval there. "Most council protocols would require extensive consultation with specialists, formal diplomatic channels, and a minimum of 6 months preparation before attempting meaningful contact. And what do you think we should do? Her tail swished once, deliberately. I think, Captain, that humans might handle this more effectively by trusting their instincts. It was exactly what Marcus wanted to hear. Rodriguez, open a channel. Let's see what it wants to tell us. As the connection established, the main screen filled with an explosion of information. Mathematical equations, star charts, chemical formulas, and artistic patterns flowed past faster than human eyes could track. But somehow, through the universal translator's attempts to process the data stream, a message began to emerge. Greetings, small life forms who travel between stars. The crystalline intelligence seemed to say, we are the architects. We create. We preserve. We remember. This is Captain Marcus Chun of the Earth vessel Prometheus. We're honored to meet you. Earth. The word seemed to resonate strangely through their communication system. We know Earth memories. Your species who builds despite destruction. Your kind who creates beauty from ugliness. Marcus glanced at Vex High, whose ears were perked forward in obvious fascination. You know about humans? We know all who travel stars. We watch. We learn. We preserve memories of what was. The energy patterns on the screen shifted to show images Marcus recognized with a shock. Earth's cities, human art, even recognizable faces from history. Your kind interests us greatly. Why? Because you create without compulsion. You build without design. You choose beauty over efficiency. Vex High stepped closer to the communication console, her tail moving in complex patterns that Marcus was beginning to suspect carried emotional significance. Architects, I am Admiral Vex High of the Vulpine Confederation. Are you responsible for similar crystal formations throughout this sector? Vulpine, who follows ancient paths, came the response, and somehow the intelligence managed to convey amusement. Yes, we build memories in crystal. We preserve beauty. We protect what matters. What do you mean by protect? Marcus asked. The energy patterns suddenly shifted to darker configurations. Great darkness comes. Destroyer species approaches this region of stars. We preserve what we can before all becomes silence. The bridge fell silent as the implications hit home. A destroyer species. Something so dangerous that an intelligence capable of crystallizing entire planets felt the need to preserve memories of civilizations before they were wiped out. How long do we have? Marcus asked quietly. In your time measurements, perhaps one rotation of your world around its star. 1 year. Marcus felt the weight of the information settle over the bridge crew like a cold blanket. But before panic had set in, Rodriguez spoke up. Sir, they're transmitting more data. Detailed information about the destroyer species, their capabilities, their patterns of attack. Marcus looked at the scrolling information, trying to process what he was seeing. The destroyer species called themselves the Swarm, and they were exactly what the name implied. Billions of individual units that consumed entire solar systems, converting matter into more of themselves. Architects, he said, is there any way to stop them? Many species have tried. All became silence. Except what? One species fought and fled. One species learned to hide. One species survived by becoming clever rather than strong. The energy patterns shifted to show images that made Marcus's heart race. Sleek ships engaged in impossible maneuvers, weapons that seemed to fold space itself, and beings that looked remarkably like enlarged versions of Earth's foxes. The Vulpines, he breathed. Vex High had gone very still, her tail rigid and her ears flat against her head. That's not possible. My people achieved spaceflight only 3,000 years ago. These images suggest. Your people survived the first swarm. The architects confirmed. Your ancestors fought and learned and adapted. Your people carry the memories in blood and bone. The first swarm, Marcus asked. Swarms come in cycles. Every 50,000 rotations of stars. Your people survived the last cycle by learning to be clever. But cleverness alone will not stop this swarm. Vex High stepped forward, her amber eyes blazing with intensity. What will? Something new. Something unprecedented. something that creates rather than destroys. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he began to understand. You think humans might be that something new? Perhaps. Your kind does what others cannot. You choose cooperation over domination. You create beauty without necessity. You help strangers for no benefit. The reference to yesterday's rescue mission was unmistakable. Somehow, the architects had been watching. Architects, Vexhai said, her voice carefully controlled. What exactly are you proposing? Alliance, cooperation, sharing of knowledge and capability. Vulpine cleverness combined with human creativity. Together, perhaps survival is possible. Marcus looked at Vexhai, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her amber eyes. An alliance between their peoples would require approval from both governments, extensive negotiations, cultural exchanges that could take years to arrange. But they had 1 year before the swarm arrived. Admiral, he said quietly, what are your thoughts? Her tail began to move in slow, measured patterns. Captain, what I'm about to suggest violates every diplomatic protocol in the Confederation Handbook. I'm listening. We start the alliance here. Now, between your ship and my authority, we begin sharing knowledge immediately, and we present our governments with a working partnership rather than a theoretical proposal. It was exactly what Marcus had been thinking, but hearing her say it made the enormity of the decision clear. They would be committing their respective civilizations to a course of action without formal authority. The risks of following proper protocols are greater than the risks of acting immediately, she said firmly. My people have forgotten we were ever refugees, but the genetic memories are still there. If I can wake those memories, convince the Confederation Council that the threat is real, and if I can show Earth's government that we have alien allies willing to share advanced technology to fight a common threat. They stared at each other across the bridge, both realizing they were about to change the course of galactic history. Architects, Marcus said, turning back to the communication channel, we accept your proposal. What do you need from us? Time, knowledge, understanding. The crystal formations on the planet below pulsed brighter. We will share preserved memories with both species. You will learn what your ancestors knew. Vulpine Admiral will remember what her people forgot. What kind of memories? Vexhai asked. Battle tactics, swarm weaknesses, technologies thought lost, and personal memories, individual experiences of those who fought and survived. Before either of them could ask what that meant, the energy patterns from the planet reached out and enveloped the ship. Marcus felt a strange, tingling sensation, as if every nerve in his body was suddenly connected to something vast and ancient. And then the memories began. He saw battles fought in the void between stars, with weapons that turned space itself into a weapon. He felt the desperation of civilizations making their last stands against an implacable enemy. He experienced the grief of survivors watching their homeworlds consumed. But, more than that, he felt the personalities of those who had fought. Their hopes, their fears, their determination to protect what they loved even when victory seemed impossible. Beside him, Vexhai gasped and staggered. Her hands pressed to her head as her own flood of memories began. But these are different, Marcus realized. These were memories of her own people carried in genetic patterns that were only now being awakened. He saw through the eyes of ancient Vulpines as they fled their original homeworld, watching it disappear into the swarm's consuming darkness. He felt their desperate creativity as they developed new technologies, new strategies, new ways of thinking that let them stay one step ahead of extinction. And he felt something else, something that made him look at Vexhai with new understanding. He felt the loneliness of a people who had been shaped by survival, who had learned to value efficiency and duty over personal choice, because personal choice was a luxury that could get everyone killed. When the memory transfer ended, both he and Vexhai were sitting on the deck, breathing heavily. The bridge crew looked concerned, but respectful, giving them space to process what had happened. Are you all right? Marcus asked, reaching out instinctively to help her up. She looked at his offered hand for a moment, then took it. Her grip was stronger than before, more confident. "I remember," she said wonderingly. "I remember why my people learn to be clever. I remember what we're really capable of when we have something worth fighting for." "The memories showed me something too," Marcus said. "They showed me that survival isn't just about being strong or smart. It's about being willing to become something new when the old ways aren't enough." Vexhai's amber eyes met his, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw no trace of formal diplomatic distance. "Captain Shun, I think our peoples have a great deal to learn from each other." "I think you're right, Admiral." "Vexhai," she corrected softly. "When we're not in formal situations, my name is Vexhai." "Marcus," he replied. Her tail swished once, and this time he was certain the movement was intentional, deliberate communication in a language he was just beginning to understand. "Marcus," she said, testing the name on her tongue. "We have a year to prepare for war, but we also have an opportunity to do something that hasn't been attempted in 50,000 years. Build an alliance between species who choose cooperation over conquest. More than that." Her ears perked forward with determination. "Build something worth preserving. Something beautiful enough that even if we lose, the architects will consider it worthy of remembering." As they worked together over the next several hours, coordinating with the architects and beginning to plan the monumental task ahead of them, Marcus found himself watching Vexhai with growing fascination. The formal admiral was still there, but underneath he could see glimpses of the person she might have been if she'd had different choices. She was brilliant, he realized. Not just intelligent, but creative in ways that her society had taught her to suppress. When she forgot to be formally diplomatic, when she let her guard down and simply focused on the problem at hand, she displayed an intuitive understanding of complex systems that took his breath away. And she was funny, not in the formal, careful way of someone making diplomatic jokes, but genuinely witty. When Chief Nakamura complained about having to recalibrate the entire ship's systems to interface with Vulpine technology, she'd remarked that perhaps human and Vulpine engineering could learn from each other's approach to creative stubbornness. The way she'd said it, with her ears slightly tilted and her tail moving in a particular pattern, had made it clear she was teasing him. And Marcus had found himself laughing in genuine delight. But it was the moments when she thought no one was looking that fascinated him most. When she studied the architect's preserved memories with wonder in her amber eyes. When she watched his crew work together with something that might have been longing. Where her tail moved in complex, unconscious patterns that seemed to express emotions her words couldn't capture. By the end of the day, as they prepared to leave Kepler, 442C with their newly acquired knowledge and alliance, Marcus had to admit something to himself. He was beginning to find Admiral Vexhai absolutely captivating. And from the way she'd started looking at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention, he suspected the feeling might be mutual. But duty came first. They had a war to prepare for, an alliance to build, and the survival of multiple species to ensure. Personal feelings would have to wait, wouldn't they? The third day brought unexpected challenges that would test both the growing alliance between their peoples and the personal connection developing between Marcus and Vexhai. They were in the middle of the first joint training exercise when everything went wrong. The simulation had seemed straightforward enough. Using the combat memories provided by the architects, they were attempting to develop new tactics that combined human adaptability with Vulpine technological sophistication. Marcus's crew was working alongside a small team of Vulpine military specialists who had been transported aboard via their advanced matter displacement technology. The Vulpine officers were impressive in their own right, but Marcus found his attention repeatedly drawn to how Vexhai interacted with her subordinates. Where human military protocol relied on clear chain of command and decisive leadership, Vulpine structures seemed to emphasize collective analysis and consensus building. The swarm standard attack pattern relies on overwhelming numerical superiority, explained Commander Rixvel, Vexhai's second-in-command, as holographic projections filled the ship's main briefing room. They send wave after wave of individual units until defenders exhaust their resources. Lieutenant Rodriguez studied the tactical displays with fascination. But the architect memories show instances where smaller forces successfully disrupted swarm formations. How? By doing what the swarm couldn't predict, Vexhai answered. The individual units have limited intelligence. They follow patterns, algorithms. If you can act in ways that fall outside their behavioral parameters, you can confuse them, Marcus finished. Create openings their programming can't account for. Exactly. Vexhai's tail swished approvingly, a gesture Marcus was learning to read as her equivalent of smile. But it requires precise coordination between different types of units. Ships with different capabilities, different roles, working together in ways that appear chaotic, but follow deeper organizational principles. Chief Nakamura looked up from his analysis of Volpine's ship specifications. Like a jazz ensemble, everyone improvising, but within a structure that lets them complement each other. I'm not familiar with that term, Commander Rixvel said, his ears tilting forward with curiosity. Human musical form, Dr. Williams explained. Individual musicians take turns improvising solos while the rest provide harmonic and rhythmic support. The result is music that's both structured and spontaneous. Vexhai's amber eyes brightened with interest. Could you demonstrate? It was such an unexpected request that Marcus almost laughed. Here they were, preparing for an existential war against a species-consuming enemy, and his alien ally wanted to hear Earth music. But as he looked around the briefing room, he realized that understanding each other's cultures might be just as important as understanding each other's weapons. Actually, he said, I think Dr. Williams might be onto something. Computer, access my personal music files. Play Take 5 by Dave Brubeck. As the complex rhythms and intricate harmonies filled the briefing room, Marcus watched the Volpine officers' reactions with fascination. Their ears swiveled to track different instrumental voices, and their tails began moving in subtle patterns that seemed to mirror the music structure. Remarkable, Commander Rixvel murmured. The individual instruments follow different melodic paths, but they create a unified whole. And each musician has moments where they step forward as a soloist, while the others provide support, Vexhai added. Then, they fade back into the ensemble, while someone else takes the lead role. That's exactly how effective fleet tactics should work, Marcus said, the realization hitting him suddenly. Instead of rigid formations, we need fluid coordination. Ships that can shift between roles depending on the tactical situation. They were deep in discussion about how to implement jazz-inspired fleet tactics when the alarms began sounding. Red alert, came Lieutenant Park's voice over the intercom. Unknown vessels approaching at high warp. Configuration consistent with swarm scout ships. The room erupted into controlled chaos as both human and Volpine officers rushed to their stations. Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he realized their worst-case scenario might be unfolding. If the swarm had arrived early, if they detected the alliance forming. Bridge, this is Captain Shun. Status report. 3 vessels, sir. Definitely swarm configuration, but they're not following standard attack patterns. They appear to be conducting some kind of reconnaissance scan. Marcus looked to Vexhai, whose ears were flat against her head with tension. Admiral, recommendations? Swarm scouts typically operate in advance of larger forces. If they report back that an alliance is forming, they'll accelerate their attack timeline. Commander Rixvel finished grimly. Marcus felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. Everything they'd worked for, the entire alliance, could be jeopardized by how they handled the next few minutes. All hands to battle stations. Volpine vessels, prepare for coordinated defensive action. As they reached the bridge, the main screen showed 3 sleek, predatory shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with an alien grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. Scanning frequency indicates they're conducting detailed analysis of our ship configurations, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. They're specifically examining the integration of human and Volpine technologies. Time until they complete their scans. Approximately 6 minutes, sir. 6 minutes to decide whether to let the scouts report back to the swarm with intelligence about the Alliance, or to attack, and risk triggering an immediate war before they were ready. Marcus, Vexai said quietly, moving to stand beside his command chair. There is another option. I am listening. We could attempt to capture rather than destroy. Learn what we can about current swarm capabilities while preventing them from reporting back. It was a brilliant suggestion, but technically almost impossible. Swarm vessels were notorious for their self-destruction protocols. Ow! Vexai's tail began moving in rapid, complex patterns as she worked through the tactical problems. The jazz principle. Improvisation within structure. We do something they won't expect. She moved to the tactical station, her fingers dancing over controls with practiced ease. Commander Rixvel, prepare the Harmony Field generators. Chief Nakamura, can you modulate your shield frequencies to match Vulpine harmonic resonance? What exactly are you planning? Marcus asked, though he was already beginning to understand. Music, Captain. We're going to play them a song. What followed was unlike any space battle Marcus had ever experienced. Instead of traditional weapons fire, the Allied ships began generating coordinated energy fields that created complex interference patterns around the swarm scouts. The effect was like watching a three-dimensional symphony performed with starship weapons. Waves of harmonic energy surrounded the enemy vessels, creating resonance patterns that disrupted their sensor arrays and navigation systems without triggering their self-destruction protocols. It's working, Rodriguez called out excitedly. Their scanning systems are offline, and they appear to be trapped within the harmonic field matrix. But it's not holding, Commander Rixvel warned. They're adapting to the frequency patterns faster than we can modify them. Marcus watched the tactical display with growing concern. They had perhaps 90 seconds before the swarm scouts broke free and escaped with intelligence about the Alliance. Vexai, he said, what happens if we modulate the harmonics randomly? Instead of following a pattern they can predict, theoretically possible, but the coordination requirements would be. She stopped, her ears perking forward with sudden realization. Improvisation. Real improvisation, not just pattern variation. Can your ships handle that kind of coordination? Her amber eyes met his with fierce determination. My people may have forgotten how to be creative, but we never forgot how to be clever. What happened next would become legend in both human and Vulpine military academies. Instead of following predetermined tactical protocols, the Allied fleet began improvising in real time. Each ship contributed its own voice to a constantly evolving harmonic pattern that shifted and changed faster than the swarm scouts could adapt. It was beautiful and terrifying to watch. Energy fields danced between the vessels like visible music, creating patterns that had never existed before and would never be repeated exactly. Swarm vessels are completely disabled, Lieutenant Park reported with awe in his voice. Their adaptive systems can't lock onto the pattern because there isn't one. Outstanding work, everyone, Marcus said. Now comes the hard part. We need to extract information from those ships without triggering their destruction protocols. The next few hours were a delicate dance of technological improvisation. Using a combination of human engineering creativity and Vulpine analytical precision, they managed to tap into the swarm vessel's data systems. What they found was both encouraging and terrifying. The good news, Dr. Williams reported, is that the main swarm force is still 9 months away. We have more time than we thought. And the bad news? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. They're not just coming to consume. They're coming because they've detected what they classify as anomalous cooperative behavior between previously isolated species. Vexai's tail went rigid with shock. They see the Alliance as a threat. More than that, Rodriguez added, her voice grim. According to these data files, cooperative alliances between different species are specifically targeted for elimination. The swarm sees them as a potential challenge to their supremacy. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Their alliance hadn't just changed the timeline of the swarm's arrival. It had changed their motivation. Instead of routine consumption, This was now a targeted extermination campaign. "There's something else," Commander Rixvel said quietly. "The data indicates that other species have attempted similar alliances in the past. All were eliminated before they could mature into effective resistance. But not before they caused significant damage to swarm forces," Vexhai added with growing excitement. "Look at these battle reports. Cooperative tactics achieved casualty ratios that individual species never managed." Marcus studied the data with growing understanding. "They're afraid of us." "Not us specifically," Vexhai corrected. "They're afraid of what we represent. The possibility that different species can work together in ways that transcend their individual limitations." As they worked through the implications of their discovery, Marcus became aware that something had shifted in the dynamic between him and Vexhai. The formal distance that had characterized their early interactions was completely gone, replaced by an easy collaboration that felt natural and right. She had moved to work at the science station beside Lieutenant Rodriguez, her graceful hands flying over controls with practiced efficiency. But every few minutes, she would glance over at Marcus with those remarkable amber eyes, and he would catch a glimpse of something warm and personal beneath the professional competence. "Captain," she said during a brief lull in the analysis, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what it's like to work with people who value creativity over compliance." Her tail swished in a pattern that Marcus was beginning to recognize as contentment, and he found himself watching the movement with fascination. There was something almost hypnotic about it, especially when she was relaxed and focused. "Admiral," Vexhai, he corrected himself, "I have to say, your people's approach to tactical analysis is remarkable. The way you can identify patterns and adapt to changing conditions in real time. It's training," she said modestly, but her ears perked forward with obvious pleasure at the compliment. "It's more than training. It's intuition. The way you knew exactly when to suggest the harmonic field modification, how you coordinated with Rixvel without even speaking." He trailed off as he realized she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. Her amber eyes seemed to hold depths he hadn't noticed before. "Marcus," she said quietly, "among my people, tactical coordination like what we achieved today requires a very specific type of partnership." "What kind of partnership?" Her tail moved in a slow, deliberate pattern that somehow conveyed meaning beyond words. "The kind that depends on complete trust, complete understanding, complete willingness to let your partner see all of your capabilities and vulnerabilities." Something in her tone made Marcus look at her more closely. There was a personal dimension to what she was saying that went beyond military tactics. And that's unusual for Vulpines? Very unusual. Most of our military partnerships are formal, structured arrangements based on rank and protocol. She paused, her ears tilting slightly as if she was making a difficult decision. What happened today felt more like how mated pairs are supposed to work together. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he began to understand what she was telling him. "Vexhai." Before he could finish the thought, Commander Rixvel approached with a data pad in his hands. "Admiral, we've completed the preliminary analysis of swarm communication protocols. You need to see this." The moment passed, but something had changed between them. As they bent over the data display together, their shoulders almost touching, Marcus was acutely aware of her presence in a way that went far beyond professional collaboration. And from the way her tail had begun moving in subtle, complex patterns whenever he was nearby, he suspected she was equally aware of him. The war was coming, their alliance was under threat, and the fate of multiple civilizations hung in the balance. But somehow, in the midst of all that chaos and danger, something beautiful was beginning to bloom. Marcus just hoped they would all survive long enough to see where it led. As the day's cycle ended, and the crew began to stand down from battle stations, Vexhai lingered on the bridge longer than necessary, her amber eyes thoughtful as she gazed out at the stars. "A successful day," she said finally. "Yes," Marcus agreed, moving to stand beside her at the observation rail. We learned a lot about swarm capabilities. And about our own capabilities, she added softly. Working together, in the reflected starlight, her furs seemed to shimmer with an inner glow, and Marcus found himself thinking that she was possibly the most beautiful being he'd ever encountered. Vex high, he began, not sure exactly what he wanted to say. But she turned toward him with such warmth in her amber eyes that words seemed suddenly inadequate. Her tail moved in a slow, graceful curve that somehow conveyed more than any speech could have managed. Tomorrow brings new challenges, she said. But tonight we can celebrate what we've accomplished. And in that moment, Marcus realized that the real alliance being forged wasn't just between their species. It was between them. The fourth day began with a crisis that would test not only their military alliance, but the personal connection that had been growing between Marcus and Vex High. It started when Lieutenant Rodriguez burst into the captain's ready room during what was supposed to be a routine strategy meeting. "Captain, Admiral, you need to see this immediately," she said, her face pale with urgency. Marcus looked up from the tactical projections he and Vex High had been studying. They'd been sitting closer together than protocol required, their heads almost touching as they analyzed swarm movement patterns, and he felt a guilty flush at being interrupted in what had become an increasingly intimate working relationship. "What is it, Lieutenant?" "Long-range sensors are detecting a massive energy signature approaching from the galactic rim." "It's not swarm, sir. It's something else entirely." The tactical display that Rodriguez activated showed a formation of ships unlike anything in the known databases. They were elegant, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around themselves, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. Unknown vessel configuration. Chief Nakamura confirmed from his station. But their approach vector puts them on an intercept course with the swarm advance force. Vex High's ears snapped to attention, her tail going rigid with sudden tension. "Those are architect ships," she said, her voice tight with something that might have been fear. "You recognize them?" Marcus asked. "From the genetic memories we received. The architects who built the crystal preservation networks." Her amber eyes were wide with implications Marcus was only beginning to understand. But, according to the historical records, they withdrew from physical space over 40,000 years ago. Before anyone could respond, the communication system crackled to life with a signal unlike anything they'd ever heard. It wasn't sound, exactly, but rather a direct impression of meaning that bypassed language entirely. "Species who build together," the architect presence seemed to say, "urgent modification of timeline required." "This is Captain Shun of the Prometheus." "Architects, what's happening?" "Swarm Advance Force has detected our crystal networks. Primary fleet arriving in time measurement of 14 standard rotations." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. 14 days. Not 9 months. Not even the original year they'd thought they had. 2 weeks. "That's impossible," Commander Rixvel protested from his station. "Our intelligence indicated intelligence was accurate when gathered." The architect presence interrupted. "But Swarm has evolved new propulsion. Crisis accelerated development. They come now to prevent alliance formation." Vexai stood abruptly, her tail lashing with agitation. "Architects, what are your intentions? Are you here to help defend against the swarm?" There was a pause that seemed to stretch for eternity before the response came. "Negative. We come to preserve final memories before extinction. Alliance cannot succeed with current development timeline." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Marcus felt everything they'd worked for, everything they'd hoped to accomplish, crashing down around them. "What do you mean it can't succeed?" he demanded. "Mathematics are conclusive. Swarm primary force numbers in excess of 10 billion units. Allied fleet maximum potential 800 vessels. Probability of victory approaches 0. Then, why did you suggest the alliance in the first place?" Marcus asked, anger beginning to replace shock. "Hope that timeline would permit adequate preparation." Hope was incorrect. Vexhai moved to the communication console, her movements sharp with contained fury. "Architects, you're telling us to give up. To let the swarm consume everything." "Not consume. preserve in memory. Beauty and creativity will survive in crystalline matrix. Not death, but transformation. Marcus looked around the bridge at his crew's faces, seeing his own devastation reflected in their expressions. Then, his gaze met Vexhi's amber eyes, and he saw something there that stopped him cold. Not despair, not acceptance, but fierce, burning determination. "No," she said quietly. "Admiral?" Commander Rixvel asked. "No," she repeated, louder this time. Her tail had gone from agitated lashing to slow, deliberate movements that somehow conveyed absolute resolve. "I don't accept those odds." Marcus felt something ignite in his chest. "Vexhi." "Marcus," she turned to face him fully, and he saw in her expression the same stubborn refusal to accept limitations that had driven humanity to the stars. "What do humans do when faced with impossible odds?" "We find a way to change the game," he said automatically. "Then, let's change the game." She moved to the tactical display with sudden energy, her hands dancing over the controls as she pulled up data from every engagement in recorded history where smaller forces had defeated larger ones. "Architects," she called out. "You said the swarm numbers 10 billion units. But they're not all combat vessels, are they? Most of them are constructors, processors, support units." "Correct. Combat units number approximately 50 million. "Still impossible odds," Commander Rixvel pointed out. "Not if we don't fight them all at once," Marcus said, beginning to understand where Vexhi was going. "The swarm operates as a distributed system, but they still require coordination nodes." "Exactly," Vexhi said, her amber eyes blazing with excitement. "We don't fight the swarm. We fight their command structure." She pulled up the data from the captured scout ships, highlighting the communication protocols and command hierarchies. "Look at this. The swarm uses a nested authority system. Individual units report to sector coordinators, who report to regional commanders, who report to primary nodes." "So," Rodriguez asked, "so if we can disrupt the command structure, the individual units lose coordination. They revert to basic programming, which is much easier to handle." Marcus studied the tactical projections with growing excitement. "A decapitation strike. Take out the command nodes, scatter the individual units. But we need to get close enough to identify and target the command vessels," Chief Nakamura pointed out. "The swarm won't just let us waltz into their formation." Vexhi's tail began moving in complex patterns that Marcus was learning to read as intense concentration. "Not waltz in," she said slowly. "Dance our way in." "Admiral, the harmonic disruption technique we used on the scout ships. What if we could scale it up? Use it to create enough interference to mask our approach." "The power requirements would be enormous," Rodriguez said. "We need every ship in the Allied fleet working in perfect coordination." "Like a jazz ensemble," Marcus said, remembering their earlier conversation. "Improvisation within structure." "Exactly. But it would require a level of coordination that's never been attempted between different species. Perfect timing, perfect trust, perfect willingness to adapt in real time." Commander Rixvel looked skeptical. "Admiral, with respect, that kind of coordination typically requires mated pair dynamics," Vexhi finished. "I know." She turned to Marcus, and there was something in her amber eyes that made his pulse quicken. "Marcus, what I'm about to suggest is going to sound insane. I'm listening." Vulpine fleet coordination relies on empathic bonding between command pairs. When two commanders achieve perfect synchronization, they can coordinate their vessels as if they were extensions of their own bodies. "And you think we could achieve that kind of synchronization?" Her tail moved in a slow, deliberate pattern that he was beginning to recognize as deeply personal communication. "I think what we've been developing over the past few days is already close to that level of connection." Marcus felt his breath catch as he understood what she was proposing. "You want to attempt a full empathic bond. It's the only way the plan could work." "But Marcus," her ears flattened slightly with concern, "an empathic bond between different species has never been attempted. We don't know what the effects might be. Temporary or permanent. Unknown." Marcus looked around the bridge at his crew, seeing hope beginning to replace despair in their faces. Then, he looked back at Vex High, studying her expression, trying to read the complex emotions playing across her features. What does the bonding process involve? Mutual vulnerability, complete openness, sharing of thoughts, emotions, memories. Her voice became softer. Among my people, it's considered the most intimate act possible. The implications of what she was suggesting hit him fully. She wasn't just proposing a tactical solution to their military problem. She was proposing something that would permanently change the relationship between them. Vex High, he said quietly. Are you sure about this? Her amber eyes met his directly, and he saw in them a depth of feeling that took his breath away. Marcus, I've been sure about something for days now. This crisis just gives me an excuse to act on it. Before he could fully process what she'd just admitted, the architect presence intruded on their communication again. Alliance commanders, new data incoming. Swarm advanced scouts have detected architect presence. Primary fleet acceleration continuing. Arrival now estimated 12 standard rotations. 12 days. The timeline was shrinking even faster. Architects, Marcus called out. If we implement Admiral Vex High's plan, what would you calculate our odds of success? Insufficient data for meaningful calculation. Proposed tactics fall outside all predictive models. Is that good or bad? Unknown, but perhaps interesting. For the first time since the crisis began, Marcus allowed himself to smile. If they could do something that even the architects couldn't predict, maybe they could surprise the swarm too. Admiral, he said, turning back to Vex High, what do you need from me? Her tail swished once, slowly, and he caught a glimpse of something that might have been relief in her expression. Time alone, away from the bridge. Complete privacy. And she hesitated, her ears tilting with what looked like sudden shyness. Complete trust. You have it. As they prepared to leave the bridge together, Marcus caught Commander Rixvel's eye. The Vulpine officer looked concerned, but not disapproving. Commander, you have the bridge. Begin fleet coordination preparations. We'll return when the bonding process is complete. Understood, Admiral. And sir, Rixvel's ears perked forward, and what Marcus was learning was the Vulpine equivalent of smile. For what it's worth, I think this is exactly the kind of impossible plan that might actually work. As they walked toward the privacy of Marcus's quarters, Vex High moved beside him with a grace that seemed almost ethereal. Her tail swayed with each step, and Marcus found his attention drawn to the complex patterns of movement that seemed to convey emotions he was only beginning to understand. Marcus, she said as they reached his door, before we begin, I need you to understand something. What? Among my people, what we're about to attempt creates a permanent connection. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't undo it completely. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her fully. In the corridor lighting, her amber eyes seemed to glow with their own inner fire. Are you asking if I'm prepared for that? I'm asking if you want that. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that went far beyond their immediate crisis. Marcus realized that she was offering him something that had nothing to do with military necessity and everything to do with the feelings that had been growing between them for days. Vex High, he said softly. I've been wanting that since the moment you first smiled at me. Her ears perked forward with unmistakable joy, and her tail began moving in patterns that he now understood expressed happiness, anticipation, and something deeper. Then, let's begin, she said, and there was something in her voice that made his pulse race with more than just tactical anticipation. As they entered his quarters and the doors sealed behind them, Marcus realized that whatever happened in the coming battle, whatever the outcome of their impossible plan, his life had just changed in ways he was only beginning to comprehend. But as he looked into Vex High's amber eyes and saw the warmth and trust and something deeper reflected there, he knew with absolute certainty that it was a change he welcomed completely. The empathic bonding process was about to begin, and with it, a connection that would either save both their species or bind them together in whatever came after. Either way, Marcus thought, as Vexhai moved closer to him. Her tail swishing with graceful invitation, it was exactly where he wanted to be. The empathic bonding process began simply enough, with Vexhai explaining the theoretical framework while they sat facing each other in Marcus's quarters. But as the night progressed, it became something far more profound than either of them had anticipated. The bond forms gradually, she explained, her amber eyes serious in the soft lighting. It begins with synchronized breathing, then progresses to shared emotional states, and finally to direct mental connection. Marcus nodded, trying to maintain professional focus despite the intimate atmosphere. How long does the process typically take? Between vulpines? Usually 4 to 6 hours. Her tail swished with what he was learning to recognize as nervous energy. Between different species, we're in uncharted territory. They began with the breathing exercises, sitting cross-legged on the floor of his quarters with their knees almost touching. Vexai's instructions were clear and precise, but Marcus found himself distracted by details he'd never noticed before. The way her ears shifted position to track his breathing rhythm. How her tail moved in subtle patterns that seemed to mirror his heartbeat. The graceful curve of her neck when she tilted her head to listen for the synchronization of their life signs. "You're thinking too much," she said softly, a hint of amusement in her voice. It's hard not to be fascinated by the process. By the process, or by me? The question was asked teasingly, but Marcus caught the genuine curiosity beneath it. Both, he admitted. Her ears perked forward with unmistakable pleasure. Good. The bond works better when there's genuine interest in your partner. As their breathing synchronized, Marcus began to feel the first stirrings of something unusual. It was subtle at first, like a warm presence at the edge of his consciousness. But gradually it grew stronger. "I can feel something," he said wonderingly. "My emotional state," Vexhai confirmed. "And I can feel yours. You're excited, nervous, and—" Her tail curved in an elegant arc, something else I can't quite identify. Marcus knew what she was sensing. The attraction he'd been trying to keep professional was bleeding through the developing bond, impossible to hide. "Vexhai, I should probably warn you that you find me attractive?" she interrupted gently. "Marcus, the feeling is entirely mutual." The simple admission sent a shock through the forming bond that made them both gasp. Suddenly, Marcus could feel her emotions as clearly as his own. The curiosity, the excitement, the professional dedication, and, underneath it all, a warmth that was definitely personal. "This is intense," he managed. "And we've barely begun," she said, her voice softer now. "Marcus, for the next phase, I need to touch you." Physical contact amplifies the empathic connection. She reached out slowly, giving him time to object, and placed her hands over his. The sensation was electric. Through the bond, he could feel her surprise at how warm his skin was, how different the texture felt compared to vulpine physiology. "Your species runs warmer than mine," she observed. "Does that bother you?" On the contrary, her tail began moving in slow, hypnotic patterns. "It's quite pleasant." As the hours passed, the bond deepened in ways that surprised them both. Marcus found himself experiencing memories that weren't his own, glimpses of vulpine worlds with their crystalline cities and aurora-filled skies. He felt Vexhai's childhood wonder at her first sight of space, her dedication to duty despite longing for personal choice, her growing fascination with human unpredictability. In return, she experienced his memories of Earth's diverse landscapes, his decision to join the space service driven by curiosity rather than obligation, his gradual realization that leadership meant protecting people rather than controlling them. "Your species values choice so highly," she murmured, her eyes distant as she processed his memories. "It's liberating, and your people's sense of collective purpose is remarkable," Marcus replied. "The way you can coordinate complex activities without losing individual identity." But as the bond strengthened, they both became aware of something unexpected. The connection wasn't just allowing them to share thoughts and emotions, it was creating something new. a synthesis of perspectives that was neither fully human nor fully vulpine. "Marcus," Vexhai said suddenly, her ears snapping to attention. "I'm perceiving tactical solutions that I've never considered before. Approaches that combine human improvisation with vulpine systematic analysis. And I'm seeing coordination patterns that would be impossible with human crews alone," he replied excitedly. "We're not just sharing our capabilities, we're multiplying them." It was then that the real breakthrough occurred. As their minds touched more deeply through the bond, Marcus became aware of something he'd been unconsciously noticing for days. Vexai's tail movements weren't random expressions of emotion. They were a complex form of communication that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. "Your tail," he said suddenly. "It's not just body language. It's a secondary communication system." Her amber eyes widened with surprise. "You can read tail speech? But that's impossible. It requires cultural conditioning from childhood." The bond, Marcus realized. It's not just sharing memories. It's sharing learned behaviors, cultural knowledge. To test the hypothesis, he reached out slowly toward her tail. She watched with fascination as his hand approached the luxurious fur. "May I?" he asked. Instead of answering verbally, her tail curved toward his hand in a gesture that he somehow understood meant invitation and trust. When his fingers made contact with the soft fur, the sensation that shot through the bond was unlike anything either of them had experienced. It wasn't just physical touch. It was direct emotional communication. Through that contact, he could feel her thoughts, her feelings, her hopes, and fears all flowing through the empathic connection. "Oh," she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. The bond has never been this strong before." Marcus found himself gently stroking the length of her tail, marveling at how the simple touch allowed him to communicate complex emotions without words. Through the bond, he could feel her responses, surprise giving way to pleasure, professional interest deepening into something far more personal. "This is what we need for the fleet coordination," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This level of connection." "Yes," she agreed, but her attention seemed focused on the sensations flowing through their bond rather than the tactical implications. As his hand continued its gentle exploration of her tail, Marcus became aware that she was communicating with him through the touch. Not with words, but with direct emotional transfer. He could feel her growing trust, her admiration for his leadership, her surprise at how natural the bond felt between them. And underneath it all, something deeper. Something that made his pulse quicken and sent warmth coursing through the empathic connection. "Vexhai," he said softly, his hand still gently holding her tail. "Are you sure this is just about tactical necessity?" Her amber eyes met his directly, and through the bond, he could feel her decision to be completely honest. "No," she said simply. "It stopped being about tactical necessity the moment I realized I was falling in love with you." The admission sent shockwaves through their connection. Marcus felt his own carefully controlled emotions surge in response, no longer possible to hide through the intimate bond they'd created. "I love you too," he said, the words feeling inevitable and right. "I've been fighting it for days, trying to stay professional, but the bond makes pretense impossible," she finished. "Marcus, what we've created here goes beyond anything in vulpine tradition. This level of connection usually requires years to develop. Maybe it's because we're different species," he suggested. "The contrast amplifies the connection. Or maybe," she said, her tail curving to wrap gently around his wrist in a gesture that felt incredibly intimate, "it's because what we feel for each other transcends species entirely." They spent the rest of the night deepening the bond, exploring the strange new landscape of shared consciousness they'd created. Marcus learned to read the subtle communications of Vexhai's tail movements, while she absorbed his intuitive understanding of human emotional expression. But more than that, they learned to function as a true partnership. When one of them would begin analyzing a tactical problem, the other would automatically provide complementary perspectives. When Marcus's human creativity would suggest an unconventional approach, Vexhi's systematic analysis would immediately identify ways to implement it. By dawn, they had achieved something that neither the Volpines nor the humans had thought possible, a command partnership that was truly greater than the sum of its parts. The fleet coordination should work now, Vexhi said as they prepared to return to duty. With this level of bond between the command structure, we can achieve the synchronization necessary for the harmonic disruption plan. And the swarm won't see it coming, Marcus agreed. But, Vexhi, after the battle, when the crisis is over, the bond is permanent, she reminded him gently. Whatever happens in the battle, we're connected now. Is that what you want? Marcus looked at her, taking in the grace of her movement, the intelligence in her amber eyes, the way her tail swished with contentment when he looked at her with obvious affection. Yes, he said without hesitation. It's exactly what I want. The battle that followed would become legend throughout the galaxy. When the swarm primary fleet arrived, they found the Allied forces waiting in what appeared to be a standard defensive formation. But when the attack began, something unprecedented occurred. The human and Volpine ships moved as if controlled by a single mind, their coordination so perfect that they seemed to dance around the swarm forces. The harmonic disruption fields they generated created interference patterns of impossible complexity, shifting and evolving faster than the swarm's adaptive systems could compensate. Marcus and Vexhi stood together on the bridge of the Prometheus, their empathic bond allowing them to coordinate the entire Allied fleet with thought-speed precision. When Marcus would intuitively recognize